so I might have to just practice over. And then we can just hide it when you're done.
Hello, everybody. I do know some of you. My name is Joan Roberts, and I'm manager of the School Health Research Network. We want to welcome you to this webinar where Dr. Julie Bishop and Professor Simon Murphy will present on current progress and future plans for the link between our network, the School Health Research Network, and that of the Welsh Network of Healthy School Schemes. And as we say, we'll talk about the developing an evidence-based Welsh network of healthy school schemes. So joining us today are Public Health Wales staff and healthy school practitioners. So thank you for joining us, both online, I think, and on the phone. In the room today, although you won't see them, we have Gillian, who is the researcher on the School Health Research Network, Liz Doe, who works in Decipher, and Andy, who's helping with technical issues, and he's very kindly stepped in at last minute, so we really appreciate that. It's still quite a new way of communicating with people with a webinar. We have done 2 for our schools, and that was quite successful. So welcome today, and just going to point out, if those of you who haven't joined the webinar before, there's just a few little points. So one is, if you look at your screen, in the bottom left of the screen, you'll see send to everyone. That's where you're going to be typing any questions or comments, and that is available throughout the webinar. So you can do that at any point. At the end of the presentation, we'll actually unmute microphones, so anyone can ask a question. And to do that, if you go up to the top of the screen, there's a More button. You'll press on the More button, and there's a sort of hands up sign. You will just press on that, and you will be able to alert us to the fact that you'd like to ask a question in person. And just one other point, at the end of the webinar, the webinar will finish, and an evaluation will come up on the screen after about a minute. It'd be really helpful for us, because as I say, it's still early days for us in using webinars, if you could just fill that out for us. So on to the main event. I'm really pleased to introduce Dr. Julie Bishop, Director of Health Improvement at Public Health Wales, and Professor Simon Murphy, who is Director of Decipher at Cardiff University and the School Health Research Network. We're based within Decipher Research Centre. So enjoy the webinar, and as I say, thank you for joining me.
Good afternoon. I'm going to start first by giving a little bit of background about the Schools Health Research Network, and Julie's going to give you a little bit about where we're taking it in terms of the context and the link to the Welsh Network of Healthy School Schemes. So, how are we working with the Welsh Network of Healthy School Scheme to develop an evidence base for its future development? Well, we originally started the School Health Research Network in Wales through a scoping and feasibility study that was funded by the MRC in 2013. It's now funded by Health and Social Care Research Wales to 2018. And what we decided to do with the network was to try and improve the quantity and quality of research with schools in order to improve young people's health. So we wanted to generate an evidence base for what seemed to work for whom and in what context, but at the same time to actually reduce the research burden on schools. So we recognised that schools often face many challenges in conducting research in terms of the time and space that they have. So we wanted to make sure that the research that we conducted was really relevant to them and really relevant to policymakers and practitioners throughout Wales. through doing that, we wanted to ensure that the evidence that we generated then was implemented into policy and practice. So we came together as a partnership with schools, researchers, Public Health Wales, Welsh Government and Cancer Research UK to develop a strategy and partnership. We launched the Schools Health Research Network in 2013 on the back of the Health Behaviour in School Children survey. So all those who participated in the survey were invited to be part of the network, and from that we had 69 secondary schools who joined initially. We're currently busy recruiting the next wave of schools for 2015-16. Recruitment is open until December and data collection is being conducted until January. At the moment we have 112 schools who are in this next wave. I think actually this is so active, it's gone up to 116 at the moment. All 22 local authorities are represented within the network. They have between 1 and 13 schools in each of the authorities, but this second wave we made a real effort to focus on particular authorities and try and get every one of their secondary schools on board. So it's a little bit of a scaling up study to see what might be needed for 2018 when we look to get 100% of secondary schools in Wales as part of the network. So 5 authorities have all their secondary schools within the network. 2 authorities have all but 1. And the types of schools we have in the network are very varied. We have size of school from 260 pupils to 2008 students. And again, the range of those schools with free school meal entitlement, we have schools from 3% to 45%. The network operates with a number of sort of key staff. So Joan, you just heard, is our network manager, and she's responsible for recruiting schools to the network and all our engagement events, and these include regular newsletters to the schools, identifying the sorts of studies that we're conducting, advice and guidance on new evidence-based practice, network events where we get schools together so they can tell us what the key issues for them in terms of the health of the school should be and what we should be researching. We conduct a biannual electronic data collection of pupils and schools. So we monitor the health of the pupils, and this ranges from issues to do with sort of sleep and well-being, through to physical activity and drug use, relationships with the school, and relationship with their peers. We also find out what the schools are doing in terms of their policy and the health improvement interventions that they're currently implementing. Schools identify the priority questions for a supplementary package each time we collect the data. So this year we're looking at issues to do with sort of self-harm, but in the future it will be other issues determined by the schools. That biannual data collection is overseen and supported by our Shern researcher, Gillian Hewitt, who also works with schools and policymakers and practitioners and academics to develop what we call research development groups. And these are groups which come together to develop bids and conduct research studies that are relevant to policy practice in schools. We have a Shern coordinator, Cheryl, who promotes this adoption process where we get in studies to the network, but also helps us to run these network events and things like the webinar today. The key thing is all our activities within the Schools Health Research Network are integrated with the Welsh Network. We contribute to the strategic board, advisory board for the Welsh Network, but our advisory board links into Welsh Government, both education and health sectors, Public Health Wales, we're linked to ESTO, and key players from the third sector. So I hope that's sort of given a little idea about the sort of basis of the network and how we've got to where we are. Julie's now going to say a little bit about where we're going in the future.
Hi, thanks, Simon. I think part of the interest in this from our point of view, inevitably, is that we've got a significant asset in the Healthy Schools programme within the public health system in Wales. It has participation from almost every school in Wales, and gives us tremendous potential to take action which is going to improve outcomes for children and young people. One of our weaknesses has traditionally been that we're not very able to demonstrate the impact of the work that we do currently, either in terms of the impact that the work that the Healthy Schools staff do on the actual school environment, the policies, the practices, the services that the school is engaged in, nor ultimately what that means for the outcomes for pupils. And I think generally we want to be able to think about the relationship between those two things, and also the relationship between the actions that we take and other outcomes such as educational outcomes. So the basis of all of this work is actually the questionnaire that goes out to schools, which Simon talked about, and schools get an individual report. So part of the positive that we've seen from this, I think, from the school point of view, is that they get something meaningful that helps them to look at issues within their school. It helps them to plan the areas that they want to tackle in their school development plan, in their pupil wellbeing plans, and in terms of their Healthy Schools plan. So they're getting something that they can share with their school community and also with people like Eston when they're inspected. So there's real genuine positive involvement from schools. But obviously from our point of view, and we're thinking about it from a public health point of view, there are other purposes that we can put that data to. And so part of what Simon and I have been doing is thinking about how we can actually use those two pieces of data, which is the pupil survey and the school survey, which looks at the policies and practices within the school, to actually tell us more in terms of some of our population health or public health goals. So, for example, we've got the potential linking with the observatory to put the data into a population level. So report the data back at population level. At the moment, we've only got information about children and young people's health on a sort of 4-yearly basis from the HBSC survey. And in terms of us being able to track change across the system and understand whether or not we're making a difference, that's actually not going to help us particularly. So what we're hoping this will enable us to do is to be able to track some of the trends and things that we're interested in on a more routine basis. It should also help all of us, and that means at the local level as well as the national level, to be able to evaluate some of the things that we're doing. And so one of the things that we hope we can have a conversation about at the end of this process, this presentation, is actually where people have got innovative work going on at the local level, how can we actually help use the network to be able to more robustly evaluate what's actually taking place, because it provides a natural environment to enable us to do that. We've also got a number of research studies that we're already working on collectively, but there is the possibility for more robust, externally funded research in areas of priority. And one of the things that's being worked up at the moment, for example, is what the potential is for looking at the whole issue of self-harm. We know that schools are finding that incredibly challenging. It's something that comes up on a regular basis, but we don't currently have the interventions that we wish we would have in order to be able to tackle that. So that's one of the subjects that the network has been working with schools on. There's also the potential to evaluate at the policy level, and one of the things Simon and I have been doing quite a lot is to link in with Welsh Government. So we've actually succeeded, I think, now in making quite strong connections with the curriculum review, as well as with the Healthy Schools work and the research. So potential for actually understanding whether or not the impact that we all want to see in terms of pupil outcomes is actually taking place. So I think the opportunities that we've got here are quite significant. Simon mentioned that we've got a couple of areas where all of the schools are involved in the survey this year. And what we're hoping to do with the public health teams in those localities, as well as with those schools, is to explore some of the issues around sharing that data, what needs to be in place for schools to feel comfortable to share that data, and how it might be useful and what it might tell us at a population level. So hopefully we'll be moving forward on quite a bit of that over the next 12 months. And obviously, people's input into developing that further will be much welcomed. What we're trying to do in this process is actually to put some of the things we talk about in terms of knowledge mobilisation into practice. So where we see Shern sitting is closely allied to the network of healthy school schemes, but having sufficient independence that it means that we can have an objective external review of the things that are happening. The common ground as we see it is health need and evidence. So part of what we've just been talking about is starting with what we know about population needs and the current evidence base. That helps us understand where the gaps are, and there's the potential for us to establish research development groups, as Simon mentioned, to look at some of those gaps, to test an intervention developmentally, potentially move to a full trial, gain the learning from that, and push that into the delivery system, which is the network of healthy schools. Look and see what that means in practice, how we scale it up, how we roll it out at population level, and similarly generate the new knowledge gaps, if you like, the areas for further development. So we think the theory, at least, and from what we've seen in practice so far, is that this is something that can benefit both parts of the system quite significantly.
So, I mean, the future is very exciting potentially in terms of where we're going with the network. But we've currently got Shern in over 50% of secondary schools throughout Wales, and we're really getting a sense of what the resource is going to be needed and the type of infrastructure that we need to have every secondary school on board by 2018. I think we also have ambitions to look at trying to extend the network to primary schools. Of course, primary schools face different sorts of challenges in terms of setting up that infrastructure. So we'd like to go through a similar process to that with secondary schools and conduct a pilot to really sort of scope up what all the key stakeholders think should happen. We're also keen to explore data linkage. We've been able to do data linkage on some of our other studies. For example, recently looking at the relationship between our breakfast consumption and educational outcomes. So again, if we were able to do that with this network data, it would give us very powerful arguments for the role of health and health improvement in improving educational outcomes. As Julie said, having a network like this gives us a surveillance function for Welsh Government and Public Health Wales. Our last data collection gave us very good data on e-cigarette use, which went all around the world and was some of the first national level data which showed levels of use and its relationship to tobacco use. And it also gives us that data infrastructure for natural experiments and policy monitoring. So our most recent survey included key questions on violence in women and healthy relationships, which can be used as benchmarks and to monitor progress for the introduction of violence in women work. So the opportunities there for future goals at sort of national and local level. We're also currently conducting a pilot for developing the research capacity of Public Health Wales and schools. So we're really interested in finding out what you need in order for you to be using this data in your work and the sorts of things that we could be looking at in that pilot. As Julie said, we've got a whole range of adopted research studies now within Shern. Some of those are coming directly from the schools, which is a really exciting development. So innovation at local level, which we can then examine and look at its possibility and potential for the network more widely. As I say, our aim is to fully integrate Shern with the Welsh Network of Healthy Schools scheme. So I suppose one of the key questions from us is, what are the things that you need from us to make that happen? Really? And that would be one of the things maybe we've got in the competition. Thank you.
I don't know whether it's worth repeating the instructions that Joan gave earlier about how to send in questions and things, because I'm conscious of the fact that quite a few people have joined since you did that. Right. I don't know if you can do that from there, or do I do it from here? Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. That was, very interesting conversation and quite a few points that maybe someone will want to pick up on. Just as Julie said, it's probably best just to remind you this is all new to you. So you can continue in the bottom left-hand corner. You can continue to write some messages and send to everyone, and then we can pick those up. But it's also possible if you go up to the top of the screen, there's the more button with some little dots above it, and in that there's a little hand picture that you just press, and then we will be alerted to who's wanting to ask a question. I am aware, having looked at the screen as we've been going through, we've got quite a lot of you who've joined us on the telephone. And that may be not an option for you to actually speak or to type in, but what we would really value doing is to be able to send us any queries or any thoughts that you have, and you could send those to Julie or obviously to me. That would be useful, and then we can perhaps discuss that further. I'm just wondering as we wait to see if anybody wants to ask anything or to comment. Just perhaps if I could just talk a little bit. I think one thing that Simon was talking about, the fact that we're sort of trying whole authority approach, and with one authority we're actually looking at all secondary school aged young people, whether they're in mainstream or in PRU or special schools, and so we're going to try and use some of the experiment and get them to trial what the data might mean to them. So I think that's another point to add, as well as in the future then looking at the primary school potential. I beg your pardon, I've been giving you completely false information. I said we're new to this game. I said that it was in the more, you pressed above the more button, apparently on the top it's the interact button. I do beg your pardon. So if you like to talk, it's the interact button. Yeah, thank you. Mike, who normally helps us, is not here at the moment, so I'd obviously written that down, not me. So I don't know if anybody would want to say anything, or whether Julie or Simon, if there's anything that you think would be useful for me to just talk through. We just have.
I think one of the things obviously we'll need to ask people a little bit about is the process here. I think those of us who work in the NHS certainly understand that these things don't always work first time, so we're all in learning mode. And it's looking from the information we've got on the screen that most of you probably aren't connected in a way that means that you can actually interact with us, which means that this may actually be a shorter conversation than we intended. But I think probably from our point of view, the kinds of things that we would have wanted to talk about if we could have had a two-way conversation would have been probably moving forward the role that some of you can play in helping us with recruitment into the scheme as we look at how we might expand it further in the future. Because obviously if you want access to the data to support your work locally, then the more schools involved in the programme at a local level, the more useful data that you're going to have. I think the second thing from our point of view is how we learn about some of the more innovative work that you might be doing, where you've got local initiatives that you've been doing with your schools that may not have had the level of evaluation that you would like traditionally, or that you're planning to do, where we might be able to test using the network to see how we can develop some of those ideas. As Simon said, we've had one or two already come through from schools themselves that are within the network, but obviously we're also interested in any work that you might be planning that this might help to evaluate at a local level. And I think the other thing that, in the way that Simon talked about looking in depth at particular areas, one of the things that we're particularly keen to do with the school environment survey is that each time it's run, is to look in more depth at a particular topic so that we can start to understand a little bit more about the relationship between some of the things that schools do and the outcomes that we see in the pupil data. And the routine survey will give us a tracking, if you like, tracking trends over time at a high level. But we want to be able to dive in depth a little bit and understand much more about the kinds of things that schools are actually doing. And they may be in some of the more emerging areas, but they may also be in some of the areas that we're looking to develop, or we've been doing for some time, like tobacco, for example. So those are certainly three ways I think that from our point of view, either now online or actually following on from this, people may wish to benefit or engage from the network.
Yeah, I mean, one of the advantages of this network is that we link in what were disparate resources together, so we are value added to our activity, and all the things that we're doing have got clear reciprocal benefits. So we've recently been doing an analysis of the relationship between school level activity and the health of their pupils, and so we've got some quite interesting things that we can say about what influences school commitment to health improvement, or what the things around the school that increase levels or decrease levels of physical activity. Now, those are good for us in terms of research publications, but we're also translating those into newsletters for schools and also briefing papers for Public Health Wales. So in that way, we can tick boxes for all the parties involved. Because the other thing to say is that we've got the opportunity with this infrastructure to conduct really low-cost studies within Wales. So I'm not saying no cost, because it's taken quite a bit of resources to set up the infrastructure. But once it is set up, we can evaluate things and find out their effect in a very short space of time. Within 2 years, we can tell you what impact it has on the health of pupils within the school.
All attendees are muted and may unmute themselves by pressing *6.
I've charted territory. Right. What I'm being told is that anybody who's online should now be able to ask a question if they wish to do so. Is there anybody who's got anything that they'd like to ask us? It'd be quite good if somebody would ask us something, even if they need to test that it actually works.
Hello.
Hello there.
Hi.
Hi. It's Nerys Edmonds from Public Health Wales, Health Improvement Division. Hello. I was muted, but they just said that we could now unmute, so I thought I'd test the line for you.
Thank you very much. That's very much appreciated.
I just was wondering, my line's not been brilliant, so forgive me if I've got the wrong end of the stick, but from what I understand, you're gathering a whole range of data from the schools that you're engaging on an annual survey, is that right?
Biannual.
Biannual. Yeah.
Biannual, sorry, okay. And I just wondered what indicators of mental well-being are being collected in that data?
Well, it would be the usual. I mean, we're using HBSC measures, so again, it allows us to have a sort of international comparison. So it would be the standard one around that. So it would be around sort of issues to do with esteem, school connectedness, peer connectedness, those sorts of issues. So on the dimension of well-being rather than sort of mental health, bullying, yeah. But also other key things which were associated with it. So like things like sleep, interaction with family, and this sort of thing.
So the kinds of things generally we would consider to be quite important in terms of that broader construct of well-being from the young people.
Okay. Yeah, no, thank you. The line's not brilliant for me, so I'm sorry I can't hear brilliantly. But I mean, it just sounds like that will be a really useful data set over time to be gathering that information.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thanks. I mean, one of the questions that just popped up on the screen, which was one of the things actually that I've written down to mention, so thank you for reminding me, Jimmy, is obviously one of the things that we're talking to other people about is the research burden on schools. So how do we have as fewer surveys as possible that meet multiple needs so that schools are not consistently being asked to take part in these things? Because we recognise that's challenging. And we know that at a local level, quite a lot of local surveys take place, some of which are reasonably robust, some of which are less robust. And one of the conversations we'd be keen to have with people working in local authority areas across Wales is how can we look at what's going on already and see whether there are ways in which the work that we're doing can actually deliver some of the same information, but perhaps do it in a much more rigorous way. One of the challenges that we've all had for some time is things like the surveys done by other organisations. Sport Wales is a good example. It's a very big survey, but it tends to produce quite different results than other surveys. And we think some of that is because of the way that they actually, the way they generate the sample, which is very much more about volunteer samples of pupils getting involved. And obviously there is inevitably a risk that you're going to get the kids that are interested in sport who are going to fill in a questionnaire about sport. And one of the advantages potentially that we can use with some of the methodology here is that the sampling is considerably more robust, so that we can actually potentially have a much more representative picture. So I think for those people, who are working in areas where local surveys do happen, we'd be interested in hearing a little bit about that if you've got ideas about ways in which we might work together on that in the future.
Yeah, I mean, we did a sort of mapping exercise for map surveys that currently go on in schools in Wales, and it's considerable. And if you look at what's happened in England and in Scotland, they've gone through a review process of youth surveys to try and sort of look at whether they can bring in rationalisation or savings. And similar things happened in Wales for adult health surveys. So I suspect, looking ahead, there will be pressure on the amount of surveys that are currently conducted in Wales. I mean, the other disadvantage is that a lot of that data isn't comparable at a national level. So you get very good local data, but you can't bring it together to an analysis of difference via or Welsh picture. So again, it's something we're trying to provide a solution to before it's probably being identified as a problem in the way it should.
Okay, we've just had a comment from somebody that the connection's been very poor, so they haven't been able to hear everything. Neris on the phone line's been very clear, and asking about people referral units to add to the response. So there's a couple of things there, obviously. The first is that one of the things we will be doing afterwards, I think, is trying to find out from those of you who've participated what the challenges were around the technology, so that we can learn from that as a process. I think probably the reason the people who are on the phone are hearing each other better is because they're on the phone network, and so there's possibly something to do with the sound possibly on the web-based system. In terms of the PRU stuff, I think Joan mentioned about the fact that one of the areas in Wales.
Yeah, we're just trialling it with one at the moment, and then when we see what the issues are, then we'll be opening it out. If that seems successful.
Yeah. So, because obviously there are real issues around small numbers. So from if you think about it practically, we really want to be able to capture those young people because they're the young people often we're most concerned about. And they're valuable to look at. We've got a large data set to be able to look at them differently. And it's really important they're included when we've got whole population samples, because they're part of the local population. But it's one of the areas where we're going to have to look in a little bit more detail before we can roll that out more broadly. But the same applies to the special schools, which is another important area of interest.
I think with PRUs, one of the challenges we want is being able to track pupils through the system, because there's such variation in the amount of time that they might spend in the PRU, but we want to know what their overall journey is rather than just looking in that 1 minute.
The other question that was asked was about whether there will be a transcript. What we have been doing is recording this, so hopefully it will be available to people online to access. I'm looking to my side for somebody to nod at me.
I'm probably a disembodied voice at the moment, but just to say that that is our plan. We have, with our previous two, will be on the webinar. One is there already on the website, and this we can put up on the website for people to watch in their own time, and to especially if there have been issues in terms of sound. So thank you for that.
So another question has come in. When will the next round of recruiting for secondary schools take place? So this current one is obviously going into 2016. So it will be starting in the autumn term of 2018, and then the idea is that we will get all the other schools.
2017.
17, sorry.
Team effort.
Primary schools, I think, again, we're trying to get some funding to undertake a pilot. So how you collect electronic data within primary schools, the sort of data that you collect, sort of questions you can ask for children at that age, obviously qualitatively different, and then how schools would actually use their school reports, and again, talking to key stakeholders like public health sales, what that might be upcoming. What we'd really like to do is be able to sort of link people so we can look at feeder schools and transition between primary and secondary schools. Those data links, which I think would be key for us. So we haven't been able to identify the proper money yet, but we're actively searching for it.
We've answered all the questions coming in online. Anybody else got any queries they'd like to raise?
Again, I might be a disembodied voice, but I would just really like to thank Julie and Simon so much. And as I say, the evaluation will come up when the webinar is finished. But I think you will all have had emails from me, so please do email any queries or any thoughts, and then we can we can continue this conversation. Maybe through another webinar, maybe other ways. But thank you very much for joining us, and thanks for everybody in the room. Okay, bye.
Thanks everyone. Bye.